people there aren't trained in securities work. What are they trained in?
How to look at pieces of paper that the securities laws require. They can check every piece of paper perfectly and find misdemeanors, and they'll miss all the financial felonies that are occurring because they never look there. Even when pointed to fraud, they're incapable of finding fraud.
No one at the SEC would talk to us on the record about Harry Markopolos' allegations, but one person who seemed to have had a high opinion of the agency was Bernie Madoff.
I'm very close with the regulators, so I'm not trying to say that they can't, that what they do is bad. As a matter of fact, my niece just married one.
Besides his niece's husband, who no longer works at the SEC, Madoff has had long-standing ties to the agency and has been called upon to give advice. At this 2007 meeting of a nonprofit group called the Philoctetes Center, Madoff seemed to think the SEC was doing a great job.
You know, in today's regulatory environment, it's virtually impossible to violate rules. I mean, this is something that the public really doesn't understand. But it's impossible for you to for a violation to go undetected. Certainly not for a considerable period of time.
But don't try and tell that to the Philoctetes Center today. Its main benefactor, the Betty and Norman Levy Foundation, was fully invested in Madoff, one of dozens of charitable organizations that have been devastated or wiped out. Madoff's customer list, single-spaced with small type, is 162 pages long, with victims running the gamut from Hollywood royalty to a carpenter's pension fund in Syracuse, New York. Shelley Ludlow has been forced to put her mother in a Medicaid-assisted living facility while she packed up their apartment to move in with a friend, all because of Bernie Madoff.
Their whole lives were turned upside down by this man that sits in his penthouse and smirks.
The same day last week, 70 miles away, Len and Marge Forrest were leaving their house that they had just sold in Setauket, Long Island, and were preparing to drive to South Florida to sell their home there. They had their money with Bernie Madoff for 30 years and lost an 8-figure family fortune 2 days before his 80th birthday.
Do you have any money to live on?
Enough, I would say, for 60 days.
Do you know other people who are in the same situation?
Oh, yes. We have a lot. Unfortunately, and I think probably the thing that tears me up more than anything is the fact that I recommended Madoff to a number of people. And they lost their money, and I'll never stop feeling responsible for that. They were all close family and friends.
Len Forrest and his friends thought they were part of a small, exclusive group of investors lucky enough to have a connection with Bernie Madoff. And because they thought they were making 12% a year, they weren't inclined to ask a lot of questions. Harry Markopolos called it the classic affinity scam.
An affinity scam is when you prey on groups that are similar in nature to yourself. So I'm Greek. If I was going to run an affinity scam, I would run it on the Greek-American community here. Bernie was Jewish, so he ran it on the Jewish community in the United States, but that wouldn't get him enough customers because he always needed new money to keep the scheme going.
Over time, Madoff extended his reach from New York to Palm Beach, where he enlisted hundreds of wealthy clients, many of them recruited from his own country clubs. And he also made connections that gave him entree to Europe and the hedge fund capital of America, Greenwich, Connecticut. It was here that Bernie Madoff made some of his biggest deals with large investment firms that were willing to feed him billions of dollars of their clients' money to manage. And in return, Bernie Madoff agreed to pay these so-called feeder funds a fortune in annual fees. The largest of the feeder funds was the Fairfield Greenwich Group. How much money did Fairfield make off Bernie Madoff every year?
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
If you're a feeder fund, what are you supposed to do for those hundreds of millions of dollars?
You're supposed to identify the world's best hedge fund managers and invest only in them, and you're supposed to make sure they're not running Ponzi schemes.
The real steroids here were the feeder funds. That's what made it an international Ponzi scheme.
Attorney David Boies is one of the most prominent lawyers in the country and is representing Fairfield Greenwich investors who lost nearly $7 billion when Madoff went under. They're suing the firm for gross negligence, claiming it failed to investigate Madoff thoroughly or monitor his activities as it promised to do in its marketing materials.
Analysis of portfolio composition, portfolio stress testing, risk management, asset verification,
Do you think that really happened?
No, we know it didn't happen, because we know all they did was turn the money over to Bernie Madoff, and they did that for 20 years.
They did nothing.
They essentially did nothing except lose their investors' money and enjoy very luxurious lifestyles from the money they took out.
Walter Knoll, one of the founding partners of Fairfield Greenwich, declined to talk to us and has reportedly been lying low with his wife at their compound on the private island of Mystique. But in a statement to 60 Minutes, his firm said that it too was a victim of Bernie Madoff, that it had placed too much trust in his then impeccable reputation, and in the fact that there had been multiple reviews of Madoff by the SEC. In the end, Harry Markopolos had been right about Bernie Madoff. He will be going to prison, but not because of anything that Harry or the SEC did. In a bad economy, Madoff's lies simply collapsed under their own weight.
No one was investigating Mr. Madoff at the end.
So he turned himself in before anybody in a position of authority began a serious investigation.
That's typically how the SEC does it. They come in after the crime has been committed. They toe tag the victims, count the bodies, and try to figure out who the crooks were after the fact, which does none of us any good.
For more video of Bernie Madoff in his own words, go to 60minutes.com.